Hi, I'm Rick. I'm Laurie and June's son. Heather, my wife, and I, and my sister Carol and her husband Peter have for many years now been listening to some fantastic stories about our mum and dad. It's remarkable, in our view, how they met, particularly in New York, and then a couple of years later in London, and married and came to Australia. We think this story should be told, and Heather and I, for Dad's 85th birthday and Mum's and Dad's 63rd anniversary, decided to have a film made about their life. And we're absolutely delighted that Ross Simons has agreed to make their film. What makes this also very special is that Ross is certainly so admired by Mum and Dad over the years that it really makes it very comfortable for them to have him tell their story for future generations to hear the story of the Aviator and the actress.
Again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
Well, Laurie and June, we're about to embark on the story of both your lives and your individual lives before you met, how you came together, and your wonderful life experiences after that. I guess here we are at your apartment at Mossman Bay in Sydney with this lovely outlook. This is probably just this apartment alone would bring back many memories for you, wouldn't it?
It does, though.
It does a lot, yes.
Yeah. But you've got also, you started off probably being city slickers, and then now you're basically country people because you enjoy your country life as well.
Well, 50-50.
Yes.
50-50, I'd say.
I'm more the city slicker. Yeah. And Laurie, the country boy.
Yeah, mainly because the great-grandchildren are down. There's more family down here than up in the country.
So Burrell does provide a lot of relaxation for you to get away from the city environment?
Oh, it does, yes.
Yes, it does. Once I'm there, I love it, but it's a love-hate relationship, really. I do love it.
Yes.
But it...
So this is, what, part of the compromise that you and Laurie reached during your married life? Is this the perfect recipe for a good marriage?
Definitely,
yeah.
Absolutely, definitely. I don't think Laurie would be here today if he didn't have Burrell. I think after the cancer, that's the whole reason that he had another interest after flying, which was fabulous for him.
So
and
Laurie,
that's something I realised, that he has to have that time up there.
So Laurie, what do you attribute to your long and successful relationship with lovely June?
Learning to put up with a lot. No. It's we've always had something in common all the way through. I think.
I think we're much more alike than people.
Soulmates.
We're soulmates, yeah.
Soulmates.
It's very important, isn't it?
Yes.
And of course, you've got a lovely, loving family around you, and I think that's very important too.
Absolutely,
very important.
Fantastic.
It's
family.
everything, really.
It's everything to us. Now we've been absolutely blessed.
Yeah.
It was the best thing that ever happened to us when we met in New York.
Yeah. Little did we realise we'd end up with how many 30-odd
30-odd family members now, but it's just been absolutely marvellous.
Beautiful.
No, he is the love of my life.
Well, Laurie, your early childhood involved quite a lot of travelling around the country.
Well, it did. I was born just within a mile from here, and my dad was a theatre manager at the old Southern Cross Theatre at Neutral Bay here, and up till 6 years of age, and then we went to Adelaide. He's theatre manager over there for, I don't know whether it's 2 or 3 years, and then we went up to Cairns, and another couple of years up there, and down to Coffs Harbour for a year, where my grandfather had the jetty. I don't know if you know Coffs Harbour, what they call the ocean side is the jetty, and they had a cinema there, and Dad was managed that until it burnt down, and then we came down to Sydney after that.
It's ironic, isn't it, that you've got this very early family connection with cinema and films.
It is.
And you ended up marrying a film star.
Exactly, yes, there you are.
It was all meant to be, wasn't it?
It's meant to be, Ross.
So your first job actually had nothing to do with flying, though, did it?
No. There was no thought of flying then because it was such a... I had nobody that was in flying, and it was very expensive to get into flying yourself then. So when I left school, I went into the bank, and everybody thought that was a very good job in those days.
Good steady employment?
Good steady employment. And all I could think of was, gee, I'll be able to retire when I'm 50. That's all I was thinking of, was retirement, really, as soon as I joined. So when the war came along, after about 2 years in the bank, it virtually started my life.
Had you always had a deep down interest in flying?
Oh yes. Always. I remember Dad shouting me a passenger trip from a little airfield down near Manly. In those days, it was just a field in those days, and I loved the experience. And
this was open air flying, wasn't it?
Open air flying, open cockpit, yes.
That's what you'd call, speaking to an experienced pilot, that's what you'd call real flying.
Real flying.
Yes.
Real flying.
So World War II broke out and you saw this wonderful opportunity to join the Air Force.
Oh, I definitely joined the Air Force rather than the Navy or the Army. Definitely wanted to get into the Air Force.
And what happened? What was your experience there? You applied at, how old were you when you applied?
18, and I had to go down to Bradfield Park, which I don't know if you know, West Lindfield. You did a course down there, and then went up to Narromine to do the actual flying on Tiger Moth and go solo there. I think we did about 30 hours flying there. And then the Japanese came into the war. We were just about to go across to Canada because this is the Empire Training School, which was part of Canada, was involved with that. And then we were sent back to Narromine to do another 10 hours before things settled down, and then we were posted over to Canada and did service training over there.
So what did you train on in Canada? What
In
sort of
Cessna cranes, Cessna twin-engine Cessna cranes. That was a service flying school. And then when I got my wings there, and then went to an operational training unit at St John's on the east coast of Canada to do an operational training course on Venturas, like a big Hudson bomber in those days. And they went to... It wasn't my idea to go onto those. From the service training school, I did rather well on the flying ability and navigation. They wanted to post me on to flying boats up in Prince Edward Island. And I stamped my foot and bit and said, demand I want to go on to Spitfires. And of course, when I went up to the OTU, there were these great big Venturas, and I was very disappointed.
Was this the thing to do, stamp your foot when you're in the Air Force?
Well, it worked. I didn't go on the flying boats anyhow. Yes.
Good. So were you placed straight into active service after this training?
No. When these Venturas on the Western Front in England did very poorly, very few came back, and they scrubbed them there, and I did a conversion course in England onto Mitchells, the B-25s then, which I was very pleased about that because a lovely aircraft. And from there, posted on to 226 Squadron up at near Norwich.
Can you tell us just briefly about some of your experiences flying over Europe?
The first trip, I wonder whether I was ever going to come back again. We're doing daylight bombing between 10 and 15,000 feet. And initially on these what they call no-ball targets, we didn't even know what we were bombing until quite a few operations after, and they were the actual launching sites for these V1 bombers, the pilotless bombs that were bombing London. So that was our main object, and then marshalling yards and airfields and things like that.
You must have had some wonderful camaraderie with your crew during this time.
Oh,
Did you fly with the same crew all the
yes,
time?
and the same aircraft too. We had I had a New Zealand Navigator and two Canadian. One was a wireless air gunner and one was a straight gunner, and we kept together through the whole series of operations.
And how long were you flying these bombing runs over Europe? For how long did that last?
I think it was from around about October, November 1943 until just before D-Day on 1944.
Did you have any times where you really felt you weren't going to make it home?
Yes, quite a few times, because the flak was very heavy. Being in daylight bombing too, the sky was just like, and they told us if you kept on the same course for more than 10 seconds and the same height, so you had to change course and change your height every 10 seconds, otherwise with their gear that they had on the German gear on the ground, they could anticipate exactly where you're going to be in 10 seconds time.
Did you ever get hit?
Oh yes, we got hit quite a few times.
So you had a few near misses.
Yes, we did that. We went over in what they call boxes of 6, 3 leading and 3 underneath them like that, and I was generally number 2 with the CO commanding officer led the box of 6, and I was generally number 2.
Okay, so you did this for some time, and obviously they had to give you a rest from that. I mean, you can't continue that.
Well, I did 30 Ops was a tour, and they asked me to stay on long, and I did another 10 operations, which they looked upon as a tour and a half. And then I wanted to go straight from there onto the Australian Mosquito Squadron near London, stationed near London, and they lent me a Mitchell to fly down to the field, and I saw the CO there, and he was quite happy, but I came back and they said you must go on a rest period first.
And what did that mean now? Rest period didn't mean having a holiday in Europe?
No, I was then posted onto the 2nd TAF Communications Squadron, which was based at North Holt for a couple of months, and from there we were flying across the beachhead, across the channel to the beachhead and back, and various communication places in England that we had to do a gravy run, more or less.
So it's non-combat flying?
Except when we were flying over to the Normandy, we were still being subject to German fighters or something like that. But then after that, the whole squadron moved over to the beachhead and established on one of these strips there, and we were flying various people to different, mainly up to the front line to bring back information for General Montgomery's headquarters there. I was posted with another 2 chaps flying little Oscars at that time, flying his officers up to the front line.
And you had some pretty famous passengers on occasions, didn't you?
Oh, I did, yes. I had Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. We flew him from Brussels up to Eindhoven, and it's on the border of Germany and Holland. And he had his 4 or 5 ranking officers with him, and he insisted coming up and sitting in the co-pilot's side. In the instance, you had to wind the undercarriage up, big crank to wind the undercarriage up, and he insisted on doing it himself, winding the undercarriage up. So I've had royalty doing my crew work.
You didn't dare argue with him, either, did you? Now, you had a very interesting experience, I believe. which was actually followed by a film being made about this experience.
Can
you tell us about that?
I think it was up at Nijmegen township, and there was this bridge across. It wasn't the Rhine, but it was very critical bridge because the Arnhem landing was on at the time, and they were wanting reinforcements to go up there to help out in the operation up there. And what the Germans had done, their frogmen had floated down in the river this explosive charge and placed it underneath this bridge. And this chap that I brought up with rear admirals and God knows what on the Anson up to near where this bridge was, we all went up to the bridge. And this chap that was assigned to defuse this bomb, this is in winter time, this is December time in 43, and he stripped off naked, completely naked, and dived into the river, swam out underneath the bridge there, and deloused it, and he got the George Cross for doing it, because he stripped off because anything mechanical could have set the magnetic charge off, the charge off.
That must have been a few tense moments for you.
It was, because the bridge was being shelled at the same time by the Germans. It didn't help.
No.
And
there were no girls around, I hope.
No girls at all. No.
Well, Laurie, after all that wartime flying, you had to have time off eventually. Can you tell us, where was the most interesting leave that you had?
Oh, my most interesting leave was when I just finished my operational training unit on Venturas, and we had 2 weeks leave, and most of us went to New York for the 2 weeks, and of course it was there that I met my future.
Well, you must have arrived in New York. He was the dashing young pilot on leave from wartime duty, looking for some female company.
Well, that went with it. Yes. But of course, wanting to see New York was a big thing too. But
so how did you find this lovely lady?
At the Hotel Edison, Cole Halliday was a chappie I went down there with virtually. They had for the 2 meals for the price of one, you could go along, and I'd had my wallet stolen actually on the OTU unit, so I wasn't flush with cash at the time, and there was a organised run by a New Zealand lady, Miss Luxford, I think it was, something like that. Anyhow, that they supplied the accommodation. And of course, with this hotel offering this meal, or 2 meals for the price of one, we grabbed it immediately. And it was there that June happened to be in the dining area at the time.
So it was a case of seeing this face across a crowded room, was it?
It virtually was, yes. Actually, I think it was... shouldn't say this, but it was June that saw me, I think, and through her companions, they more or less picked me out for you to go along to see. Is that right, June?
Yes.
Yes.
I was asked who I'd like to sit with for
Yes.
lunch that day, and I looked around the room and I chose you.
There we are, so foregone conclusion.
So what happened after that, or shouldn't you tell us?
Yeah, I was quite very in this. I was only 19 myself, and June was only 17, and still virtually a schoolgirl. Or had graduated, of course.
Just graduated, but I was still being chaperoned.
And she had to be in by 12 o'clock. That was the deadline. Now, there was another girl. What was the other girl's
Elizabeth
name?
Hallowell.
Yeah, she had to be in by 10 o'clock. Now, it was looking at one stage there that this Cole Halliday was trying to get me to go with this Elizabeth girl who had to be in by 10 o'clock, see? Now, of course, I wanted to be with June, because not only because I wanted to be with June, but 12 o'clock deadline too was a big help. So I finished up with June, took her home,
You made good use of that 2 hours, did you?
Yes, yes.
So you started to go out then from then on?
Yes, yes.
About 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times, yes. And I know this accommodation where I was, it was a private home really, and I had June on the phone. The people in this private home offered to take us. I've been talking about June ad infinitum, and they said, "Oh, we'd love you to take you to the Stork Club. You know, they're quite a famous Stork Club." And I said, "That sounds good." And I was on the phone for about 2 hours speaking to June, trying to convince her to come along with me to the Stork Club. Never did.
There was something to do with
You probably
clothes.
had to do her hair or something.
No, it was something to do with clothes.
You didn't feel that you had the right outfit to go
Didn't
there?
have the right outfit, and I was just beginning to buy my own clothes at that age, you know, whereas before it had been...
So you're a young girl of what, 17,
17,
18? Yes, well that's a
17.
fairly daunting,
Yes.
social
And
occasion to go to
I'd
a
had a
place like
few
that.
outings with Laurie, but I felt that I'd worn what I had, and I, didn't want to let him down.
Yeah, but the people in this private home, they've been trying to ring out for hours it seems, and they laughed about it, but at the same time they would have loved to have been able to phone out, but this conversation went on and on. I was trying to convince her to come along.
So you didn't get to the Stork Club, but where did you get to?
We went to the Waldorf Astoria to a
Yes.
wonderful dance.
And there were a couple of big occasions that went on. That
Madeline Carroll was there, and
Madeline Carroll was right, and
it was a fundraiser for Britain, and that was a marvellous night.
So I guess all these entertainment places and social areas were filled with servicemen and their friends.
Yes, yes. A lot of it, like for fundraising, there weren't that many people in uniform. I think quite a lot of those models, power models, was it?
Yes, John Power models were used.
Yes, there were quite a few of
yes,
those.
They
got very
What are they?
There was a very famous
modelling
group of-
agents.
a modelling agency called the John Powers Model. I mean, they were, I suppose, June Daly Watkins might have been the Australian.
So what was it, a kind of rent and escort thing?
No, it was just they were used in theatres to show. They're very, very beautiful models, and to be one was quite something in those days in New York.
I think it sort of attracted all the big givers to come along and view the beautiful girls and one thing and another. Of course, I had the most beautiful girl at the time.
Naturally.
Naturally.
It was I don't think we went. We were out about 4 times on dates. But that would have been about it in 2 weeks.
Well, then the reality of life hit you again, and you were called back to service.
That's right.
So it must have been a mixed reaction, I guess, when you had to leave.
I was falling in love, but it was virtually my first love, and I thought, oh well, that's number one. There's probably others to come, perhaps, but honestly, I never thought I'd get married, did I? With the 3 of the old school chums, and I was the first one to get married by quite a few years, actually. Yes.
So you had to leave June then after what, a couple of weeks, was it? You had off?
Yes. That's all. That's the leave. 2 weeks leave was maximum.
Can you remember that last time you spent together?
Yes.
Yes.
What were you doing? Where did you go?
We went to Radio City Musical.
Yes.
To a movie. Then Laurie took me home, and I don't think we ever felt that we'd see each other again. Really, did we?
No.
Not really. Not really. Not in reality. It was just
just had such a good time.
It was terrific while it lasted, but I guess being wartime,
I
this
put
was the way you
friendship
felt.
in that because really that was more what it was than a romance, wasn't it?
Yeah. I got a couple of kisses out of it, I must admit.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just leave it at that, shall we?
But it wasn't, we weren't.
No.
It wasn't a
We hadn't
passionate
thought-
love affair.
that we were,
No.
just that
But
he was going back to war, and
She made a very big impression on me. I can
and vice
tell you.
versa, vice versa.
Lovely.
And then I went on the Queen Elizabeth over to England and joined the. Went down to Bournemouth there, held there for a couple of months before going on to this conversion course onto Mitchell's, as I mentioned before.
So what happened then, Laurie? You resumed your wartime active service,
You back? Yes.
back to flying the Mitchells.
Yes.
Yes. And then you had some news about childhood evacuees being returned.
Oh, yes. So I was in London on leave and reading the newspaper, and just a small power in the newspaper mentioned that a lot of these child evacuees were returning to England, and gave the headquarters, address of the headquarters there, and I thought, I'll go down there and find out if June was amongst the lot coming back. And very staggering to find that she'd been in the building about 15 minutes ago and would be back in about half an hour. So I waited for that half hour and went on from there.
And you had this wonderful reuniting.
Yes, it was. It was
Yes,
wonderful.
Yes, that was
Wonderful.
That was great.
Could you believe it at the time?
No, unbelievable that the coincidence of her being there, because naturally if she was one of the ones coming back, I would have got her address, and whether I'd have then gone to see her at that address, I don't know, but I most likely would.
Were there any other romances that you had before you met up again with June?
Not at all. Amazing. Here I was, toast of London and so forth, and I left my hotel key in the hotel door, and nobody used it at all.
Well, you see, you were meant to have this lovely
I think it was, yes.
reuniting and wonderful relationship.
Yes. The rest of the boys on the squadron used to tease me about June and January, you see, because it was June and January in New York.
It's June in January because I'm in love.
So that's
All right, so what you have to tell us now, what happened after this wonderful meeting together again?
well, June was on this play with Ensa, touring all over England and Scotland, and we kept in touch then. And by this time, I was mainly stationed in Brussels on this rest period, during this rest period, and quite often there was an aircraft to be taken back to England for servicing, and that meant that was just myself in the aircraft, and I was able to do a bit of a dog leg before I reached my destination. And I used to find out where June was and land there first and see June, and then go on to deliver the aircraft where it was supposed to have gone.
So you were sneaking around the
Sneaking
skies.
around a bit,
Sneaking
yes.
around the skies looking for your girl.
Indeed. So that went on for quite a while, and then I got to know you, where your mother was staying.
Yes,
Renting
we
a
were in
house
Hampstead.
there.
You went
And
to
quite
see
often
her.
June would be on leave herself from their play, and at the house, at your mother's home,
Yes.
and I used to come and visit them there when I was on leave.
And then we decided we'd fallen in love, and you knew you were going back to Australia as well.
Yes,
stage.
yes. Unfortunately,
So,
the day we were married, I got notification that I'll be going back to Australia in a month or two. So it wasn't very pleased. Matter of fact, went up to Australia House and stamped foot there too, but it didn't work.
Still didn't work.
It didn't work, no.
So you went back to Australia. not knowing that you were going to meet up with June again?
Oh
or
yes,
what?
we were married. We were married then.
But June was not allowed to go with you.
No, and unfortunately, what irked us a lot was that the New Zealanders were on board too, and they were allowed to bring their wives back with them.
Why was that rule brought in?
No idea. No idea.
Did they think perhaps that by marrying a non-Australian lady that
But the
there might have been some sort of threat to security or something like that?
No, because the New Zealanders had married English girls too. Same situation. No idea.
Well, that meant you had to leave June,
Had to leave June.
come back to Australia,
Yes.
and then
Do a-
you got involved in the Pacific War.
Yes. You had to do a refresher course at the Nilluquin and then down to East Sale on Beaufort's, and then I was posted up to Williamtown to go on to Mosquitoes, and the war ended, and then that stopped me from.
So once the war ended, June was then allowed to come back to Australia.
Oh no, she,
No,
was,
no, I came
she
before
came
the
back
end of the
before the war ended.
The end of the European War.
Right.
That was May 5th, 1945.
June landed in what month? was it?
July the 31st,
In-
1945.
So from July the 31st until I was discharged in November.
Yeah.
So during that time, June spent most of the time with my parents up in the country there,
in Ball,
waiting for the birth of Richard.
Ah.
which was
So you didn't waste any time, did you?
No, did not.
Didn't.
Did not.
I guess that was the era, though, wasn't it?
But
I
we
mean,
only had a month together in England.
Yes.
I mean, that was
And I didn't know anything about that until I met my sister at Central Station in Sydney, and Yvonne, my sister, said, "Oh, you're going to be father." And this shook me a bit then.
yeah.
Well, you must have known how it was done.
I must admit,
Or perhaps you
a
did.
quick learner.
A quick learner.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So here we are.
So then you had the wonderful arrival of your first child.
Yes.
Yes.
And when was that?
October the 9th, 1945.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would have been around about the end of the war, was it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Oh, yes.
It was.
Yeah.
So the war ended. You felt like I bet you felt like a bit of a rest after all your flying on active service.
Well, I would have liked to have stayed on in the Air Force myself, but it was just automatically discharged, and then I had to find a way of earning a living then. And I thought, well, the opportunity to start up a little plastic business then, and that didn't work out. After about a year, that folded up.
That was in Sydney, was it?
That was in Sydney. And then a lot of these aircraft, and particularly these Osters, which were a very light aircraft where you could land in your backyard virtually, I thought that'd make an excellent aircraft to start up an air taxi business. And I came across a chap that was very interested on the financial side of things, and so we applied for these war surplus Osters at Richmond, and just west of Sydney here, and we went down to see Drakeford, who was Minister for Air in Canberra, to state our case, and he got a very favourable reception, and I think we paid about £1,000 each for these Osters, and we bought two of them.
So where were you proposing to run this taxi service?
From Bankstown to anywhere. At ninepence a mile we were working on then. I had one good trip, went virtually up to Darwin, flying this company director who once he used to inspect these different cattle stations all the way up to Darwin, and it taken me a couple of months or more to do this, and we actually did it in about 8 days. Wonderful idea. So much so that he started up his own air taxi or own company aircraft station at Tamworth.
You must have thought you were in seventh heaven, having the love of flying, having all your wartime experience now behind
Yes.
you, and all that wonderful flying experience, and still being able to fly
Oh, definitely.
and enjoy the
Oh,
spirit of it.
I love flying. Yeah, and then we actually went broke on the air taxi business, and luckily I joined Qantas in 1948 and got a regular salary for the first time in a few years.
Yes. But before that, our gorgeous daughter was born
Of course. So
in 1940.
had two children to look after
1947.
then.
Carol?
Well, I guess, Laurie, it was a shame about the air taxi business because it was something that you were really enjoying, but there was something greater ahead that you were going to enjoy even more.
True, because gave me the opportunity to fly bigger aircraft again and different routes, to fly all overseas and seeing the world. I did have the chance of joining TAA at the same time, and I chose Qantas mainly because I thought it'd be a bit boring just flying between Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne and things like that. So,
But also, I guess, from a family point of view, you also had to consider June and the children now
that's
being
right.
left behind, because in those days, I guess the tours of duty, the overseas runs, were
Yes.
quite extensive.
it was quite good. The best part of it, if you did an 8-day trip, for instance, you had 8 days off when you came back, which was very, very,
Yes.
very, very
So
enjoyable.
that was fair.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
So
even.
what kind of aircraft were you flying with Qantas initially?
Start off on the DC-3, the C-47 DC-3, flying up to New Guinea, and then went on to DC-4s, Skymasters, flying up to Japan, Norfolk Island even, Singapore, New Zealand.
And those were the days when flying was really glamorous.
Ah,
It wasn't just a means of getting from A to B like it is today, but it was a glamorous
It
profession
was.
to be involved in, and people who were flying were dressed up to the nines, and
They were.
it was really a glamorous adventure for everybody, wasn't it?
it was. And we had the most beautiful hosties in those days too, because and I was on the New Guinea run where the new hosties were initiated onto flying there, so it was.
Perhaps they knew you were there, you see, and you were...
Oh, of course,
Yes,
of course.
That's what it was, Laurie.
It was very enjoyable. Just as well I had June, otherwise I'd been led astray.
You resisted all attempts.
Yes. Then I went for 6 months on the Super Constellations, and which I didn't like because they weren't very. Their air conditioning in those was terrible, very hot and dry, and I suffered from sinus and some dry eyes. And luckily, the Boeing 707 came into being in 1959, and had about 6 months on those, and then we had a 4-year posting to London on those, which was the best part of our lives. We had these 4 years we had in London.
Well, still talking about aircraft, that must have been a very interesting transition for you to go from propeller-driven aircraft to jets.
Oh, well, a big change.
Was that difficult for you to handle?
Luckily, I didn't have very much trouble myself, but a lot of chaps did have, because there was a different technique to fly them, mainly with the power of the engine, because you didn't get an instant response to thrust when you open up your throttles on the jet engines, where in propellers you more or less felt you were being dragged forward immediately.
Well, you must have thought that all your birthdays had come at once when you were posted to London,
Oh.
going back to your old stamping ground, basically.
Indeed, and June's family there too. So.
Of course.
Yes,
So they must have been 4 wonderful years then.
yes, and what's more, we were at in Surrey in
Virginia Water.
Virginia Water, which is right next to the
Wentworth
park.
Club.
No, yeah, the Wentworth Club was fantastic.
with
They
famous golf.
and we were virtually honorary members. They're very small fee to join there if we played between Monday and Fridays. The weekends were a different matter. but we could still go to the clubhouse and go to the restaurant and so forth, but not play tennis and golf on the weekend.
And our
what
children were 13 and 15, which made it fabulous for them
Yes.
too.
I was just about to ask you
Yes.
what was happening with the children
Yes,
at
no,
this
they
stage.
came with us. A lot of the children of the other pilots went to boarding school in Australia, but we wanted Carol and Rick with us. So we did have a wonderful 4 years, all of us together.
Carol went to the same school that Fergie went to, but she survived all right.
Yes.
So the 4 years must have gone so quickly for you
Yeah.
because you were enjoying it so much.
Well, it did. Well, we packed a lot in those 4 years, and I could have asked for another 2 years posting, but I thought if we'd stayed for another 2 years, Rick was 19 and Carol was 17 or something. I thought if we stayed for another 2 years, they would have never come back to Australia with us. You know, they'd have found partners, jobs over there.
Yep.
And so I thought the wise thing, and my parents weren't in very good health at that time, and I want to get back.
We promised them every year we'd
Yeah.
come back for a holiday to be with them, which we did, which we honoured.
So you returned to Australia after 4 years
Yes,
and resumed your flying with Qantas.
yes.
And by this time you advanced to a later aircraft?
I was still on the 707s for until 1972. And then I went on to the jumbos, the 747s after that, and from 72 to 78, that's what I finished up on flying on the jumbos. And my grandson, as I mentioned, is still in Qantas. He's still flying the same aircraft that I was flying on the
Still going.
jumbos. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you must have been one of the first Boeing 747 pilots for Qantas, weren't you?
For Qantas, yes, and more so on the 707s. Qantas got the early 707s, which was a shorter aircraft and less powerful engines on them, and they had on hot days you had to have water injection into the engines to give them the power to take off. So it was in India and some hot places like that. You're a bit struggling a bit.
You had an
Right
incident,
on
Laurie,
maximum.
which actually made headlines at the time.
With that bird strike one, yes, that was quite an interesting one. On takeoff, this was. And
Whereabouts was this flight?
At Sydney, at Mascot, and there was this flock of seagulls on the runway, and we started to take off, and as we got near, they all flew away. But there was a second flock on the runway, which didn't get airborne until too late, and we ploughed right through them. And we lost number 3 engine, and number 4 gave a bit of a cough, and that wasn't too good. This was after the point of no return. You had to keep on going then.
So, Laurie, what sort of damage was actually done to the aircraft with the bird strike?
Well, when that second flock of seagulls didn't become airborne until too late, quite a few seagulls gone to the cowling of number 3 engine, and it broke one of the front blades, which went through the cowling of the aircraft, hit the runway, and then bounced up and put a hole in the tailplane of the aircraft. Then,
As you sat in the pilot's seat during this period of some minutes after this strike, what sort of feelings were going through your mind? Did you have the procedures in your head to follow, or was it more a seat of the pants situation?
well, I didn't follow exact procedures with this engine. Number 3 engine, I kept it going because I felt when I was advancing and playing around with the throttle that it was still giving me thrust, power, and so that's why I kept it going.
So the normal procedures would have told you to shut it down. Is that right?
Yes, number 3.
But you didn't shut it down because you believed that you still had some power there.
Right.
So what happened then?
Well, when we got up to a safe altitude, and number 4 kept going along quite well, the procedure then was to dump the fuel down to landing weight and come and land on a 3-engine landing.
Okay, now there was obviously an inquiry following this incident.
Yes. Well, during that inquiry, they quizzed me as to why I didn't shut down number 3.
In other words,
because
not following procedures.
Yeah, virtually, yeah. They queried me why I didn't shut down number 3 because the N1, which checks your actual revolutions of the blades, was showing that it wasn't functioning at all. In other words, the engine wasn't giving any power. And I said during the inquiry, I'm convinced that it was. I'd swear that I was getting thrust out of it when I was advanced the throttle. So they weren't too happy about that part of it, and it wasn't until a couple of weeks after that the chief engineer of Qantas wrote me a letter saying you were quite vindicated about the N1. It could be giving you power because that instrument had been knocked off with the bird strike, with the birds coming in.
So as a result, were the future procedures altered?
It was taken into account. Nothing written down about it, though, as far as I know.
So initially, you were what, reprimanded by Qantas?
Oh no, not at all. No, but I wasn't reprimanded. But they thought that maybe I should have shut down number 3 engine, or why didn't I? And I said the reason I didn't because it was still giving me some power.
Did that reaction from Qantas disappoint you?
A little bit.
They sort of questioned your ability a little bit. Didn't they?
Yes.
And it must have been a bit of a slap in the face, temporarily anyway.
Temporarily. It's as I say, it was. What I should do really is go along and see the written report of the whole business, which I never bothered to do. So it didn't worry. All in all, it didn't worry me that much because I knew I'd done the right thing.
Yes. Well, you landed the aircraft safely
and walked away from it.
And walked away.
Yes. And
then within 2 or 3 hours, you were up on another flight.
Up with another aircraft.
There was no getting over it and having a little rest.
I could have called in the standby crew to take it on, but I and the rest of the crew were quite happy with the way things went, and decided to keep on going.
Is it best psychologically, do you think, to do that?
I think so. Yes, I think it's when you have a bit of a incident like that, to get on the horse and ride it again.
And you obviously had a trouble-free flight.
We did.
Yes. Yes. Was that the most serious incident that you encountered?
Flying wise, I think yes. I had one passenger going from San Francisco to Honolulu that was playing up a lot, and the chief steward came up and said, "But we can't control this chap at all. Can you do something about it?" And he said that he's just upsetting the rest of the passengers, and he's gone berserk. He's a big Canadian chap going to Western Australia on as an engineer to one of the mining fields there, actually. Anyhow, I got out and they convinced me that he was uncontrollable. So we got the handcuffs out and truncheon which we carry there, And I said, well, at the first sign of trouble, there's about seven stewards on board. I said, you all get around too, and if it gives any trouble, I'll give you the signal, and we'll pounce on him. So, and he was very rude and poking me in the chest and so forth. And I gave the signal. We all hopped onto him and slapped these handcuffs onto him, and I didn't have to use the truncheon onto him because there were 7 stewards that they were only too pleased to get onto him because he had evidently given them hell in the cabin there. There was one big passenger, 2 English passenger, that he wanted to have a go at this chap himself, he said. So I had all the passengers behind me, and we got to Honolulu, and so sat him down in an aisle seat, and during the rest of the flight into Honolulu, he was carrying on, but he kicked one of the hostesses in the bottom as she was going past in the aisle. So one of the procedures from that was that anything happened like that again, they'd put the chappie on the window seat so he didn't disturb anybody in the aisle. And of course we notified ground at Honolulu that we had a passenger go berserk, and had the Hawaiian police waiting for him. Great big Hawaiian chaps they were too. They grabbed him. The last time I saw as we were leaving the aircraft, this chap was flat down on the ground. Evidently he'd still played up getting him off the aircraft. Flat down, face down. He had blood on his face, and these great big Hawaiian policemen sitting on him. And then I was asked by the manager at Honolulu whether we'd take him on in another aircraft at all. And I said, no way, he's not getting on a Qantas aircraft. And I don't know how he got back to Australia, or whether he was sent back to Canada or not.
Was he an Australian?
No, he's a Canadian.
So you don't know what happened to him?
I don't know what happened to him.
Probably ended up in a Honolulu jail.
Yeah, I think he was kept there for a long, because we slipped then. When we got to Honolulu, we had a couple of days there, and I knew that during those 2 days there was no way he left Honolulu during that time. How he got on, I don't know. Other airlines, the Qantas manager would let other airlines know too what went on. So I don't think they were very keen to have him.
A long row home.
Yes, long row home.
So you continued your flying career, and when did you retire from that?
In 1978, it was in June 1978.
How did you feel on that last day? What was your last trip?
My last trip was to Mexico, and coming back from, what was it? Was it Mexico or no? I'm sorry, it was Honolulu, with this first officer, big chap, and there was a terrific wind blowing it down at Mascot on landing there, and had to use a few unusual things to get on the ground there, and it worked out quite well. And on this program that I was supposed to do another new trip to Noumea actually, and I didn't have to do that. So that was my last trip from Honolulu to Sydney.
So you must have had some nostalgic feelings on that last landing.
Yes. At the time, I didn't. As I say, I thought I still had to do this other trip to Noumea, so I didn't know it was my last landing actually. So, looking on back,
in a way, that was probably a better way to go. Do you think?
A better way to go. I know I'd done a good job on my last landing. Yes.
Now, tell me, Laurie, is it a fact that when pilots get together for a chat, all they talk about is their takeoffs and landings?
Pretty, not quite, no. But flying does come into a lot. Yeah.
Looking back on your years with Qantas, What feelings do you have about it? Were they the most enjoyable
They were.
professional years of your life?
They were really. I mean, the Air Force time was that tops everything. But the Qantas years were 30 years in Qantas, and they were pretty enjoyable. Right off when I was flying, first started flying, I would have paid them to fly really, and I was being paid to do it, so it was wonderful.
Let's leave Qantas now. You had enjoyed the wonderful years flying after the war with Qantas, and now you're looking forward to retirement.
Yes.
And spending much more time with your family, in particular with June. That must have made you feel very comfortable and uplifted.
Well, it did, but at the same time, it was that year that shortly after my father died 6 months or 3 or 4 months before I retired, and my mother died about 6 months after I retired.
Well,
so,
she said she waited till Laurie retired.
Yeah.
And I believed her.
Yeah, very shortly after I retired, my mother died too. So it was a worrying time.
It took the gloss off the initial
It did.
period.
It did.
Yes.
But
did you have any, when you started your retirement, did you have any immediate plans? Did you have any plans worked out as to how you were going to spend your retiring years?
I wanted to be as much as I could up in the country. We had a lovely home at Roseville at the time, and then we had the property, which was fairly rough at the time when we bought it. And we spent years gathering up stones. And the
That's the part that you really liked.
I did like the work that we did.
My Massey Ferguson tractor took over the role of the 747 really. So it worked out well. We put a trailer behind there, and I was up steering the tractor, and June was loading all the rocks into the trailer. So I reckon it was a pretty good system.
Not quite the concentration required on the tractor.
No. I got used onto chainsaws and brush cutters and cattle too.
All his toys.
All my toys.
His gadgets.
Yes. So it was very interesting. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
So you thought there was a pretty good life ahead?
It was a pretty good life. Yes.
And of course, since then, you've been spending so much time there.
Yes. Less and less lately, because as the family grew, all these great-grandchildren came along, and June was very much attracted to them down in Sydney.
So, Laurie, you've really had a wonderful life, but you did have a little hiccup with your health.
Yes, in 1985, unfortunately, they found that I had bowel cancer, and after numerous tests and God knows what, Dr. Sam Sacker, a very good surgeon, did the operation and successful. You worry about when you have bowel cancer whether you're going to end up with a sac on the side, and I didn't have to have this sac. But it looked like the liver had been affected afterwards, and I had a specialist X-ray that, and he said he thought I actually had cancer in the liver, and he said there's 3 things, or 2 or 3 things you can do. I can implant a gadget that will exude some chemical which will quieten thing or prolong the cancer, or you can wait 2 or 3 months and have another X-ray there to see what was going on. And I opted to wait and see what went on. And fortunately, when the X-ray was taken, it was quite okay. The couple of spots that were there before were evidently taken there when I had hepatitis and coming down from New Guinea in 1950, I think it was. And so I was very lucky there.
Well, I guess during your flying career, Laurie, you must have had any number of incidents, some humorous, some not so humorous. Can you recall any of these now?
There's one that mentioned my name in Qantas years after that. They always forget about the bird strike. That was something that you should be able to deal with anyhow. But they always mentioned this snake bite. And I was in Bangkok on my way up to London, and just before a flight I was feeling a bit peckish, and I thought I'll go down to this restaurant, quite a respectable restaurant too, and sitting there having a bit of food, and I felt this brushing up against my leg, and I thought a cat had come into the restaurant, and the tail, how they smooch up to you, and I thought this tail was just brushing my leg there, and I thought, in a restaurant like this, it shouldn't have a cat, and I gave it a bit of a kick, then all of a sudden there was a grab on my leg like this, and that's strange. I couldn't see any cat, couldn't see anything at the time, and I got back to the hotel and had a look at my leg, and sure enough there were a couple of little puncture marks though, and I think, a snake did occur to me, but I didn't think it could be. And I went on with the tour of duty to, we were going to Athens at this stage. Got there, and usually the crew get together and have a few drinks on the top of the hotel. Rang up the first officer and said, not feeling too good, I think I'll miss out tonight. And next morning I really felt crook. I had to crawl to the bathroom. And luckily we had a couple of days there, and I got better over those 2 days. When I eventually got to London, I thought, I better go along and see the Qantas doctor there, report this. And he measured the bite marks. Being an Englishman, he didn't know much about snakes, but when I got back to Sydney, the Qantas doctor in Sydney measured everything up, and he said, they're definitely snake bites. I got 3 weeks off. They gave me 3 weeks off. But blood felt terrible during that time. Didn't feel clean at all.
I also believe, Laurie, there was an incident on one of your New Guinea flights that you'd like to recall.
Oh, actually, it was coming back from New Guinea. We generally went up as far as Lae, and then on the way back we were going to Port Moresby, and we picked up passengers there, and we were running late. And in those days, if you got into Sydney after 10 o'clock, Qantas would provide transport to take the passengers home. So I was, being a company man, trying to keep Qantas' name good. You went back to the passengers and asked how they were situated, and that Qantas, it looks like we're getting in after 10 o'clock, and Qantas will take you home, trying to boost things up for them. And there were two chaps there I was speaking to, quite well dressed and quite nice chaps. And I was speaking to them about this transportation home. And two chaps in front of which I found out after were policemen. He said, "Yes, they'll be going to Long Bay."
So there were two crims.
There were two crims being taken back to Sydney to go to Long Bay. But I spent quite a time talking to them, being nice to them, and saying that Qantas would be doing the right thing by you. Yes.
And they responded to you, did they?
They were talking quite nicely to me, yes. But in my report, I was quite shirty in my report, saying that the ground staff of Qantas at Port Moresby should have warned me that we're taking criminals back. And in the Qantas newspaper, there was quite a funny little episode and drawing about me talking to these two criminals.
And after your experience with that Canadian passenger, you were ready to slap the handcuffs on them.
This is way before the Canadian. This is about 1952. The Canadian chap was about 1976 or something like that. Yes.
And did these crims, were they handcuffed or were they...
No, they weren't handcuffed. Evidently, they weren't vicious or anything like that. They'd probably done some paperwork wrong or something like that. I don't know.
Probably your charm won them over.
Yeah,
Anyway,
more than likely. But I was trying to put on the charm to quell these passengers, irate passengers.
Well, you saved Qantas 2 fares there, didn't you?
Indeed, yes.
And what about that incident at Avalon?
Oh, remember when the very bad bushfires swept right through Victoria virtually, and our training airfield was at Avalon, which is just west of Melbourne, near Geelong actually. And these our training aircraft were on the ground there, and this wall of flame was coming straight through, and it would have. In other words, we had to move the aircraft, and we moved them up into the Air Force also on the airfield. So we taxied these aircraft up to their apron. They had a big apron up there, concrete apron, and we taxied up there, and they were safe up there. But the Qantas company were very glad to have saved a couple of aircraft there, and I know we big reception at the Wentworth headquarters there, and
You got a Christmas bonus?
Yeah, no cash, but
Silver tray.
they present me with a big silver tray there with an inscription on it. Yes.
Very good.
It's very good.
And you saved them
Yes.
probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Exactly.
From the time you say goodbye, from the time you say cheerio, will you take a handshake too for your journey as you go? Keep a prayer within your heart that the time will surely fly to the day when we shall meet again. From the time you say goodbye, from the time you say goodbye, from the time you say cheerio, will you take a handshake too for your journey